He handed me the letter like it was a grocery receipt. I was standing in our kitchen, still in my work clothes, and Garrett leaned over my shoulder, scanned the page, and said, "Honestly, maybe this is a sign you were never cut out for that world." Then he laughed, a short, easy laugh. His phone buzzed, and he walked away to answer it, unbothered, like he'd just commented on the weather. I stood there alone, holding that letter under the kitchen light. What he didn't know was that letter wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of his. My name is Paloma Reyes. I'm 38 years old, originally from San Antonio, raised by a mother who cleaned office buildings at night so I could sleep in a warm bed. She worked double shifts during tax season and never once complained about it. And I watched her and decided early that I would build something she could be proud of. I put myself through college on scholarships and part-time jobs. It took 6 years instead of 4 because I was working the whole time. But I finished, and I walked across that stage with a business degree and no debt I hadn't earned. After graduation, I spent 11 years in corporate operations and consulting. Quiet work. Methodical work. The kind where you walk into a company that's bleeding money and you find exactly where the wound is. I was good at it. I wasn't flashy about it. I drove a used car, wore sensible clothes, and kept my wins to myself. Garrett was charming when we met, confident in a way that felt like security back then. But over time, I noticed something. He only respected success when it had his name attached to it. But my accomplishments existed in a category he couldn't quite place, so he filed them away somewhere he didn't have to look at them. Our marriage had been unraveling slowly, the way a hem comes loose before you notice the whole seam is gone. I had stayed longer than I should have, for reasons that made sense at the time. But I was running out of reasons. I wasn't the woman who walked into rooms and demanded attention. I was the woman who walked out of them and left things permanently changed. If you've ever worked twice as hard just to be taken half as seriously, this story is for you. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who was supposed to believe in you the most? If that question just hit somewhere real, hit the like button right now and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. New ones drop every week. About 3 weeks after the layoff, Garrett's company hosted a dinner party. It was the kind of evening his world ran on. Good wine, business talk, everyone performing slightly better versions of themselves. He introduced me to his business partner with a smirk already built into his face. "She's between opportunities right now," he said, and made little air quotes with his fingers. The table laughed the polite laugh people do when they're not sure if something is a joke. I smiled. I picked up my glass. I said nothing. What bothered me more than the joke was what came after it. As the night went on, a few people assumed I'd stepped back from work entirely, that I was home now, that the career chapter had quietly closed. Garrett never corrected them, not once. He let the assumption settle like it was the truth. Later, I couldn't sleep. And I was sitting on the edge of the bed when I heard him on the phone in the hallway, voice low, but not low enough. "She's talented, sure, but without a paycheck, she's got no leverage here. I've been thinking about next steps for a while." I sat very still. Next steps. I turned that phrase over in my mind and understood exactly what it meant. He thought that with me, unemployed, financially dependent, and quietly humiliated, the balance had finally shifted. He thought this was the moment he'd been waiting for. I got up, went to the kitchen, and opened my laptop. Here's what Garrett didn't know. I hadn't just been laid off. In the same week my position was eliminated, I had quietly negotiated a severance package and signed a consulting retainer with a private equity group. I told no one. Not a friend, not my mother, not Garrett. And I had learned a long time ago that the fewer people who know your next move, the cleaner it lands. The firm was called Aldervale Partners. They worked in distressed acquisitions. The sector they were currently focused on was logistics, the exact sector Garrett's company operated in. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I closed the laptop. I wasn't going to beg him to respect me. I was going to show up in his world in a way he'd never forget. What followed was a slow, deliberate unraveling of everything he thought he controlled. He started leaving me off shared calendar events, Dinners with his inner circle, weekend plans with colleagues, things we used to attend together. When I asked about it, he barely looked up from his phone. "You wouldn't have much to contribute right now anyway." Short sentence. A throne like it cost him nothing. I wrote it down. I had started keeping notes. At his sister's birthday brunch, he told the table that I had lost my footing professionally. He said it with a casual wave of his hand, like he was describing the weather changing. Then he said I'd been finding myself, and people laughed. I smiled and reached for the bread basket. Inside, I was filing it. The date, the room, the exact words. Then came the money. I noticed the transfers first when I checked our joint account and saw a pattern. Money moving out in uneven amounts, labeled as business expenses, no documentation. When I asked him for receipts, he looked at me the way you look at someone who's asked a very stupid question. You don't need to worry about finances you don't understand anymore. I didn't argue, and I called a financial attorney the next morning. Every humiliation he handed me felt like he was trying to make me disappear. But something unexpected was happening inside me. Not grief, not rage, something cleaner than both. Every time he looked at me like I was already gone, I felt it sharpen. Clarity, the kind that comes when you stop hoping someone will change and start deciding what you're going to do instead. He told me one evening that we should talk about the future next week. His tone was practiced. Gentle in the way people are gentle when they've already made their decision and want you to think it was mutual. I knew exactly what that conversation was going to be. I just needed a little more time. What Garrett never asked about, because he had stopped being curious about my life entirely, was who I had been working with. Just 6 weeks into my retainer with Aldervale Partners, I had already led 2 operational reviews and rebuilt a cost structure for a flagging distribution company. The work was good, the kind that reminds you who you are when someone else has been busy, telling you who you aren't. Aldervale was quiet in public and aggressive in private. They moved on distressed companies with the patience of people who knew the numbers better than the owners did. And lately, they had been eyeing a particular logistics group. Underperforming, over-leveraged, propped up by optimism and bad forecasting. I hadn't connected every dot yet, but I was getting close. There was one more thing Garrett didn't know. The woman running point at Aldervale and I had history. Good history, 7 years of it. She had been trying to hire me full-time for 2 of those years, and I had always been just settled enough in my previous role to say not yet. I hadn't planned for things to collide this way, but when they did, I didn't stop it. At a routine Aldervale strategy meeting on a Tuesday morning, I walked into the room, poured coffee, and sat down. The acquisition shortlist went up on the screen. 3rd item down, Caldwell Group, parent firm, logistics division. I recognized the name immediately. My hand stayed flat on the table. My face stayed neutral. I nodded and took notes, the same as everyone else in the room. Her name was Diana Voss, 52 years old, managing director at Aldervale Partners, and the most precise person I have ever worked alongside. We met at a conference 7 years ago, and within 20 minutes of talking, she looked at me and said, "You're wasted wherever you currently are." She was right, though it took me time to admit it. Diana had no interest in ego. She respected people who did the work correctly, and had nothing but impatience for anyone coasting on charm. She was the kind of mentor who didn't soften feedback, but always delivered it like she believed you could handle it, which, coming from her, felt like the highest compliment possible. She called me after a board meeting, her voice even and direct. "We're moving forward on the Caldwell Group acquisition." She paused just long enough to make the next sentence land. "I want you leading the operational integration team. You know this sector better than anyone I have." I accepted before she finished the sentence. Let me be precise about what that meant. And I was now the person who would oversee the restructuring of the company Garrett had built his entire professional identity around. His team, his title, his leverage. All of it was going to pass across my desk. Meanwhile, he was telling friends at dinner parties that a big acquisition was coming and that he was positioned beautifully for it. "Strong exit package," he said, according to someone who mentioned it to me without knowing the full picture. He was already planning the announcement. He told me at dinner one night, relaxed, generous with his confidence. "Things are about to change for me. Big moves coming. You'll want to pay attention." I looked at him across the table and said, "I'm sure it'll be very memorable." He smiled like I was finally giving him the admiration he deserved. I picked up my fork. A few days later, Aldervale's legal team sent preliminary paperwork for review. Garrett's name appeared in the executive roster. Those documents were going to land on my desk. The acquisition closed on a Thursday. Aldervale scheduled the formal transition meeting for the following week. Standard procedure. Key executives from the acquired company come in, meet the integration team, begin the handoff process. Professional, structured, no drama built into the agenda. Garrett arrived in a tailored suit. I watched him through the glass wall of the conference room before he saw me. He walked the way people walk when they believe the room is already theirs. Shoulders back, pace unhurried, a smile ready before he even reached the door. He opened it and stopped. I was seated at the head of the table. Legal pad in front of me, pen in hand. At integration documents stacked to my left, the room was already full. He looked at me the way you look at something that shouldn't be where it is. "What?" he said, and then stopped. "What are you doing here?" I looked up from my notes. "My job, Garrett. Sit down." He looked around the room. A few colleagues from his firm. Aldervale's legal team. 2 analysts. No one moved to correct anything. No one looked confused except him. Diana walked in 30 seconds later, set her folder on the table, and addressed the room without ceremony. "This is Paloma Reyes, who will be managing all operational transitions. Her decisions on structure and staffing are final." Garrett sat down. For the first 40 minutes of that meeting, he tried. He offered suggestions, redirected conversations, who attempted to assert himself the way he always had in rooms like this one. Each time, I let him finish, and then returned the discussion to the actual agenda, professionally, without heat, without a single visible crack of satisfaction on my face. The staffing structure slide came up near the end. His name was not on it. The acquisition did not include a retained leadership position for him. He was being bought out and released. Same as the other non-essential executives. The numbers were fair. The decision was final. He asked for a 5-minute break. In the hallway, he turned to face me. His voice was tight. "You did this. You set this up to humiliate me." I looked at him without raising my voice. "I took a job. You decided how to feel about it. That's not on me." "You could have told me. You could have said something." "When?" I asked. "At the dinner party, when you put air quotes around my career. At your sister's brunch. When you moved money out of our joint account and told me I didn't understand finances anymore." He tried a different angle. His voice dropped, almost softened. "After everything You laughed at me, Garrett." I said it cleanly, without flinching. "In our kitchen, while I was holding a termination letter. I didn't forget that." I turned around, walked back through the conference room door, and pulled it shut behind me. I filed for divorce within the month. The financial documentation I had been quietly collecting turned out to matter quite a bit. My attorney described the paper trail as unusually thorough. Garrett's legal team had fewer options than he expected. His buyout from Caldwell was modest. My operational review had uncovered what his own reporting had been smoothing over for years. The company was more leveraged than he'd admitted to anyone, including himself. Diana offered me a full-time senior role at Aldervale 3 weeks after the transition wrapped. I accepted. I packed up the house, put what I wanted in a moving truck, and drove to a city I had always said I'd live in someday. On my first morning, I drove myself to the Aldervale offices in a car I had bought myself. I was wearing a blazer I'd had for 4 years. There was no fanfare, no dramatic arrival, just a parking spot, a badge, and work I was already good at. I thought about Garrett once, briefly in the elevator on the way up. Then the doors opened and I stepped out. He thought losing my job made me less. Turns out, it just made me free. Free to walk into the room he never thought I'd reach. If someone in your life has ever laughed at your lowest moment, someone who was supposed to be standing in your corner while you were already on the floor, then you know exactly how Paloma felt in that kitchen holding that letter. That specific kind of hurt, coming from that specific kind of person, cuts differently. Drop your story in the comments. What happened when someone underestimated you? I want to read it. And if this one landed for you, Click like right now. It helps this story reach someone else who needs it today. If you made it to the end of this one, you already know what it feels like to be counted out by someone who should have counted you in. Subscribe so you never miss a story. New ones drop every week, and they're always about the people who stayed quiet, worked hard, and showed up when it mattered most. I'll see you in the next one.